I'm Andrew Blustein, Vice Chairman of Garfunkel Wild, and this webinar is starting off much like this month started off, pretty confused and chaotic. So bear with us. I'd like to tell you that we did that purpose. Everyone jumped on, and we underestimated how many people would be joining, but we had to switch technologies, and I appreciate everyone who joined. Now, we had allotted this for 30 minutes, not quite sure. We'll probably go beyond that, especially as we messed up the time here. There is, if you want to ask questions, you can see the box and ask the questions, and we will take the questions. As they come in, but at the end. And in classic social distancing, my partner, Jim Deering, is going to be talking, but he's going to be talking from Albany, and Stacey and I, my partner Stacey Gulick and I, are across the desk. Now, what we're talking about today is not to debate the merits of having hospitals in New York City and ASCs, whether they should be restricted to elective, to doing non-elective procedures. But it's not the place for it. But we know that various ASC associations are opposing moves like this at this point. Also, while Governor Cuomo has said he's generally supportive of this, he has not issued an order as of a half an hour ago. If other people know about it, put it in. But if I was a betting man, I would think that that's going to be happening. So right now, this is only New York City, but I think that the issues that we're going to talk about are really applicable to both. And the last thing I want to mention is that we have hospitals. I'm looking at the people who've logged in. We have a lot of hospital representatives. We also have a lot of ASC representatives. And we thought about dividing it into two separate presentations. But our theory was that there's no time. And this order, as Jim Deering will explain, is coming upon us, the effective date, faster than we know. So this is the agenda. We're going to turn it over to Jim. I'm going to talk, again, this is Andrew Blustein, and then Stacey Gulick is going to join us for the questions at the end, time permitting. Stacey is a co-chair of our HIPAA compliance group, and she participates in many of our other groups, and she's a former risk manager and hospital administrator. So we're all hard at work here. Also, one last thing before I turn it over to Jim, what we're not doing today is we're not dealing with a host of other issues. This is a very narrow presentation on Executive 100. We are being besieged and keep besieging us with HR-related questions. For example, we have a team that's prepared at Garfunkel to deal with that, but we are not talking about that today. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Deering in Albany. Jim, take it away.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hopefully so. Just go.
Oh, great. Thank you. So as Andrew mentioned, I'm Jim Deering. Before joining Garfunkel Wild, I'd been the general counsel of the state health department and had over 10 years experience there, including working on the response to the Ebola outbreak. So that experience is certainly helpful in terms of the current circumstances with COVID-19. So we're going to get more into the order from the mayor, but before we do that, we're going to put it in context a little bit by providing some information with regard to the authority on the order, the effective date, the end date, and the risk of non-compliance. So as everyone knows, yesterday, March 16th, Mayor de Blasio issued an executive order directing hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers in New York City to immediately move to cancel or postpone elective procedures and to cease performing those procedures within 96 hours after issuance of the order. So in terms of the authority for that order, Executive Law Section 24, that's in New York statutes, gives the chief executive of a city or any other municipality authority to issue a local emergency order to what the statute says is protect the life, property, or to bring the emergency situation under control. So Mayor de Blasio used that section, Executive Law Section 24, to issue his Executive Order 100. So when looking at the order, the questions arise in terms of what's the effective date of the order. The order itself was effective upon being issued, and that requires, quote, immediate, end quote, efforts to move, to cancel or postpone elective procedures. However, it does delay the time that hospitals and ASCs must cease performing elective procedures to within 96 hours of issuance of the order. So the obvious question then is, when do elective procedures have to stop? So when we look at 96 hours is obviously 4 days. We know that the executive order was issued on Monday, March 16th, but we don't know the time to start counting the 96 hours. So we're attempting to find that out. We're attempting to find out when the order was actually issued, but unless and until that information becomes available, facilities should plan on ceasing all elective surgeries effective midnight, March 20th. So that would make Thursday the last day for any elective surgeries. So the next natural question is, well, what's the end date of this executive order? The executive order that says that it remains in effect for 5 days, which means until 11:59 p.m. on this Saturday, March 21st, unless terminated or modified at an earlier date. However, that doesn't mean that the requirement is going to end then. Executive Law Section 24 only allows these orders to be in effect for 5 days without being renewed. And we can expect the order will be renewed, obviously. Under that provision of the law, the mayor can continuously renew these orders in 5-day periods during the state of the emergency. And finally, the last piece of background before Andrew gets into the specifics of the order are, what are the risks of noncompliance? So before we get into the issue of noncompliance, a lot of you may ask, can this order be challenged for? Certainly could be. However, there are two issues. Number one, it's unlikely that a lawsuit would be successful. And number two, good luck getting a judge since the courts are essentially shut down. So that brings us to the question of what happens if a facility or a person doesn't comply with the executive order. So the EO or executive order states that violating its terms is a Class B misdemeanor. And that's the penalty that's actually set forth in Executive Law Section 24. Putting that into context, a misdemeanor is obviously a crime, and that means potential jail time. For a Class B misdemeanor, that's up to 3 months, probation of up to a year, and/or a fine. And not only is there the potential for individual criminal liability, there's the potential for criminal liability for the facility as well. So in addition to that, a criminal conviction can have obvious ripple effects, including, among other things, implications with regard to the ability to participate in Medicare or Medicaid, as well as ramifications with commercial payers and the ability to continue to participate with them. Also, for physicians, from an OPMC perspective, the Office of Professional Medical Conduct can bring professional misconduct charges against a physician's medical license. There's the provision that provides for that in the event of a conviction of a crime, among other provisions. So the bottom line is you need to comply with the order. And now I'll turn it over to Andrew to discuss the implementation and other aspects of the order.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So what that means is you have today, tomorrow being Wednesday, and all of Thursday to do two things. Come up with the plan on how you're going to do this, and also execute that plan. So there's not a lot of time, all right? So the order which was attached to the invite, at least the first invite to this, has really two sections that are applicable to what we're dealing with. Section 5, which really deals with New York Health and Hospital, and Section 6, which is everyone else. They're relatively identical. So let me just read through this with you. It directs hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers. Again, that's why we did it in New York City. So not yet until Governor Cuomo does his thing. It's going to be anywhere else. To immediately move to cancel or postpone elective procedures. So the immediately means, again, you've got today till through let's say, close of business Thursday to do it. And what is the it that you have to cease doing? So you have to all hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers have to identify the procedures that are deemed elective, and we'll talk for a second about what that word means, by assessing which procedures can be postponed or canceled based on patient risk, considering the emergency need for redirection of resources for COVID-19, okay? So a lot to do in a very, very short period of time. Now, let's talk about the definitions. Elective, there is no real definition, okay? We've looked through, different, for preparation for this, we've looked through different formulations of that. Essentially, having spoken to some of you, and I really appreciate the feedback that we've gotten so far, most people understand what elective is. One kind of workable definition, and we're not physicians, to the physicians on, I think you understand it probably better than we do, but it's a procedure that is beneficial to the patient, or else you wouldn't be doing it. But it does not need to be done at a particular time. Or contrast that with an urgent or emergency care type of procedure. What that is, leading up to this, people were asking a lot of, what about this, what about that questions. You now know as much as we do about the definition of elective. So I know it like at both ends, or we know at both ends. So if it's a purely cosmetic procedure, that is not something that has to be done, obviously that's elective, okay? And you can go all the way to the other end, where the person's, if they don't have it done, it's going to cause significant damage or could develop into something. There are so many specialties on the phone right now that I'm not even going to start giving examples because we'll get lost. I think in the GI context, it's a little clearer potentially, but there is going to be some difficult line drawing, and we're going to, in the end, tell you how to protect yourself. We're going to give you a form. But one of the points that when we're preparing for this, actually, Stacey made, which is important, is somebody might be elective right now, and then it might be that they call up and they say, hey, doctor, does it mean anything? I've now developed this symptom. And that symptom will mean to you that the situation is changing. And because of that change, it's now the status has gone from elective to non-elective. And that made us realize that when you're calling people up, and I think you really have to be thoughtful about this, and whether it's goes to the Governor Cuomo's order, it'll be the same thing. If you're canceling Andrew Blustein, let's say he's just getting a cosmetic procedure, God knows I need a lot of those, you cancel, and then there should be like a little chart where you say call back whenever, or engage whenever. But it could be something for Stacey where, sure, we can postpone this for a week, but a week from now, we've now gone into a different territory. So we're going to call we're going to call Stacey back, and we're going to then schedule it, right? So if you just go out there and cancel everyone, first of all, I don't even know how you come back and recoup from that. You're going to start at the alphabet. I don't know how you do that. So you need to be thoughtful about how you do it. And also, and that's why we put, malpractice versus misdemeanor. There's going to be a judgment call that you're required to make. In some ways, no different than the judgment call about whether this person is able to have a procedure, right? But it's a different judgment call. Can this person be elective versus non-elective? Again, easy to tell at each end. We're talking about really the middle. If you make the judgment incorrectly and the patient suffers harm, there's going to be some ambulance chasing lawyer who's going to claim, well, you went ahead and you knocked it off and you should have realized that it was non-elective. So your lawyer will defend that. And in some ways, the defense of we're in the middle of a crisis and we were making calls to what to do will be helpful. It's not like you did it because you were going to play golf. That's not the situation we're under. But again, on the other side, if you just say, the hell with this, we're just going to do everything, as Jim was saying, you run the risk of having a misdemeanor. Okay. So the question becomes how to operationalize this order. I started to touch on some of them by at least having the chart that you're going to have to rely on to call people back. But what we have decided is, unfortunately, the only people who can make the calls, and by the way, we're thinking about this as we're doing it. I see the questions are flying in, so God bless. But we said, unfortunately, and to all the physicians on, don't hurt me, this has to be on a case-by-case basis made by the physicians. You know the patients, you know their medical history, you have to make that call. It's not like the administrator who's going to not know the patients can just do it. It might be that you say, again, and I am not here to make these calls, but it might be that someone says, hey, for all people who are just having a routine colonoscopy because they turned 50, those, boom, that's elective, we're moving on. And that one, I guess, could be categorized. But most of it is really going to require physicians to sit down. Again, we don't have a lot of days and go through, okay, Andrew Blustein, yeah, that's non-elective. And we decided, again, we're doing this as fast as this came out yesterday. We gave you a sample form, which I've now put up. We're not in love with the form, but we think you need something because remember, it's malpractice versus misdemeanor. We didn't want to be in a situation where, and by the way, how likely is this? I don't know. But if somebody were to say, and it might be a competitor, how come that ASC, for example, is putting out all these cases and we're not, blah, 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 and maybe they come in, okay? So we tried to keep it simple. If you're a doctor, you'd write patient's name, schedule, procedure, date of birth. I understand, I am aware that due to COVID-19, an executive order has been issued requiring hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers to cancel or postpone elective procedures. The reason why we didn't say this executive order is we're anticipating there's going to be other executive orders. Also, when we go and do this in the other states that we practice in, we won't have to say New York. And then the second one is I have evaluated the above patient and have determined that in my professional judgment, again, you could be wrong or right, this is just a judgment, the risk to the patient that would result from postponing or canceling this procedure is such that the proposed procedure is not elective. not elective. The reason that we decided to do it in the negative in this way is for every procedure that you perform, you need this form filled out. If you canceled somebody, then you don't have to ever say, well, you know, they were elective, not elective. By them not being there, or they canceled themselves, it's elective. So to the administrators on the phone, and I see a lot of them are writing questions, which I can't read and talk at the same time, you're going to have an added obligation, and I know everyone's stressed out. I feel it beyond, I mean, I'm with you, not beyond you. But you're going to have this. If you're seeing 60 patients, you're really going to need 60 of these if you want to protect yourself. Could you argue it from the medical record? Yes. We're just trying to make it operationally easier, okay? Now, once, when boards are going to meet or medical directors are going to meet, you'll come up with the policy. If you don't want to do what we do, you want to come up with something else, okay. If you want to ask us about it, okay. But whatever you do, you need to distribute it to the medical staff, okay? And again, I wanted to emphasize this, treating physicians, you have to, or if you want to deputize somebody, you need to keep a list of callbacks, because no one, you listen to the talking heads, you don't know when this is going to end. And so because we don't know that, where you think somebody a month from now, it might be a very different situation than 2 months from now. You are going to need that list. So don't plunge into this without that. Okay, miscellaneous issues. Because we have a lot of hospitals and a lot of ASCs on the phone, we anticipated that happening. We really want to stress that you need to talk to each other, okay? A lot of hospitals own into ASCs, that's great. Even if you're an ASC that's freestanding, talk to your hospitals. This is a time for dialogue and sharing as we fight this collective problem. And again, besides communicating it to your medical staff, you need to talk to your non-medical staff about what's going on, not just for the psychological. When they start to see volume coming down, it's not necessarily the end of the world. Again, we're not talking about HR. There's going to be other webinars to talk about that, and we have a task force that's being inundated. But you need to explain to them what's going on. Maybe they can help you with these extra forms, but communication is extremely important. Okay, so that's Executive Order 100. That's operational. I see that everyone hung in. In fact, we got even more people. So I'm going to turn over Stacey to handle some questions while I look at some other ones. And keep them coming.
So just from an administrative perspective, we are going to send around copies of these slides to our entire list. And that will include the confirmation form, so you can feel free to copy that. And if you have any questions about developing policies, that type of thing, you certainly can call us. We didn't have quite enough time to put all that together. I see that a lot of people are questioning our decision to recommend that you cease doing elective procedures on Thursday. Once again, we are still looking into that. We didn't know exactly what time the order was signed on Monday, so we didn't want to be liberal on this. It is a conservative viewpoint to end by midnight on Thursday. You guys can choose how much risk you want to take there. It's 96 hours from the date it was signed, from the time it was signed. We're not exactly sure what time that was on Monday. In regard to whether your med mal will protect you, obviously we have never been here before in the middle of a pandemic. Certainly if your decisions lead to something unexpected happening or negative happening, you can raise this as a defense, but right now we have no idea how the judges will decide that.
Right, and what we would say is, if you were going to be protective, if there's a question, then go to the side of it not being elective. Because if that question is you're not sure, then err on treating that patient in doing the procedure.
Right. We are seeing some questions up here regarding specific types of procedures. I don't think we can go into that too much. I appreciate that pain management is probably a difficult course but pain can lead to very negative effects. So I don't want to say that every pain management procedure is elective. I think that is, again, an evaluation to be done by the applicable physician.
Right, and somebody yesterday was talking to me, who happens to be on this call, and was saying, you could have tingling in your arm that is just, your normal kind of, you're at the typewriter, or it could get so painful that you could lose potentially some functions. That's a different story. So, it's too varied to really break it down. Also, some people are writing in that they're repeatedly questioning whether it was Monday night that it happened or Monday morning. If you registered for this seminar, we will be sending you, Jim Deering has calls in to New York City attorneys at the Department of Health there, and we will get that. But for now, assume Thursday's it. If I had to guess, I would think it will be Friday as well, but that's all we can say at this point.
We have questions whether this rule applies to office-based surgeries. Office-based surgeries fall under a different category than ASCs and hospitals. Probably the mayor's office didn't think that through, but as of now, it is not included in the executive order. So I think you can proceed with procedures at office-based facilities. That falls under a different legal structure.
Okay, so
I think regarding follow-up calls, I don't think we'll dictate to you who will make those follow-up calls. To people who have been canceled, I think this applies to, but
right. But what I would say is, somebody asked a good question. Given that we don't have a lot of time, and this is, a health crisis, there's no question about it. I'm not worried about somebody saying, "Wait, you had your anesthesiologist make the call," versus, your performing surgeon. Ideally, it'd be a performing surgeon, but you can only do what you can do. Again, people keep asking the same question about office space. This does not apply to office space. I suspect that's coming down. I just think that in the scramble, they didn't realize that yet. Okay, so, what I would say is this. You'll get all the slides within a very short period of time. If you look at the last slide that's on questions, you see that it has my name, number, and emails, as well as that of Jim Deering in Albany and Stacey here. We're here for as long as we can physically be here. So call us, and I know some people are asking about what are the topics. You give us the topics, Garfunkel Wild. We'll put on presentations. We are here for you to get you as much as we can through these thorny issues that coronavirus is unfortunately presenting us with.
But I just wanted to let you know, right now we have a telehealth webinar scheduled for Thursday at noon. I have lots and lots of people scheduled, but just in case you didn't get the invitation, we are talking about telehealth on Thursday at noon.
And we will be using this larger technology, yes, so we don't crash. So we apologize, but it is the kind of spirit of what we're all going through. Everybody stay safe, and we will be speaking to you as these days go on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.